Okay, good evening, everybody. Okay, the goal of tonight's shiur is to come up with a clear conclusion about the biggest topics that could come up in building a sukkah in 2021. Okay, first, we've all heard of a concept called ma'amid b'davar makabel tumah. It means supporting your schach with things that are not kosher for schach. Okay, so how big of an issue is this really? Okay, you're invited out for a meal, you walk into the sukkah and you look up, and your heart starts beating fast. How big of an issue is it really? Okay, so the way it comes out in halacha, so this is based on a Gemara you had a couple days ago, based on the Gemara Chaf Aleph Umud Beis. There was a discussion, person who was using the kari hamita, the bed frame, as the way to support his schach. So there's different opinions in that Gemara. So the way it comes out in halacha is that lechatchila, which means when a person's building his sukkah, he should avoid supporting his schach with things that are not kosher for schach. However, b'di eved, which is clear, means not only if he already ate in the sukkah, it means if his sukkah is already built, even if we're holding a week before sukkahs, you put your sukkah up and then you realized that you supported it with metal beams, you supported your schach with metal beams, and halacha, it's clear that even in that case, it's 100% fine. If you ask me, is it a good thing to go and solve the problem? I'd say it's a good thing. Are you obligated to? It's clear that you're not obligated to. Okay, so meaning this issue is sometimes understood to be a much bigger issue than it really seems to be. So if a person's invited to a house and the schach is 100% being supported by metal beams, it's 100% fine to eat in the sukkah, make a bracha with kavana, no problem at all. If you're building your own sukkah, we do preferably want to avoid this issue. Now, how do we avoid this issue? So the easiest way to avoid it is to make sure that there's something which is kosher for schach, supporting my schach. So in other words, if a person has a metal framed sukkah, so if you put a wood board or a couple wood boards or the bamboo, which they give out with the Sukkah Depot Succos, so that's sitting on your metal, and then you put your schach mat or whatever type of schach you have on top. So now your schach is being supported by your bamboo, which is kosher for schach, and the bamboo is being supported by the metal. So that's an easy way to avoid the whole issue, but it's just important to emphasize that as much as a person should avoid it, if it was not avoided, it's not going to make the sukkah not kosher for any reason. Okay, so that's the first issue. Now, let's say a person, this happens in Baltimore almost every year, that when there's a windy day in Sukkos, so the schach starts flying down. Okay, so if it's Chol Hamoed, it's not that big of a deal. You have to get out your ladder, but you put the schach back up. But if it's on Yantif, it's on Shabbos, so you can run into a much bigger issue. Problems of putting the schach back up. So let's say a person has an idea that he wants to tie down his schach. So are you allowed to tie down your schach on Sukkos? So if a person wants to do this, so the only thing he needs to make sure of is that if you use materials which are kosher for schach, which are good for schach, then you can tie it down normally. So in other words, if a person wanted to go to Home Depot and buy cotton string, so cotton string is something which grows naturally, could be used for schach. It's produced, but it's something which technically could be used. So to use that to hold up your sukkah is fine. Now let's say you don't want to go to Home Depot and buy cotton string. So what we used to do, I brought my father here, he could be my witness for all my stories that I tell. So what do we do? So we tie down our schach with the plastic ties. So you're not allowed to hold up your schach with something that's not kosher for schach. Plastic is not good for schach. So what do? First, we throw on a couple small pieces of wood, which makes it that the schach will not fly away in a normal wind, a ruach mitzuya, a normal wind. Then securing the schach in an additional way is not a problem. So if you want to tie down your schach with any type of easier material to come about, more than your cotton string, so you have to make sure that your schach will be able to withstand normal weather with things which are good for schach. So the easiest way to do that, get some small pieces of wood, throw it on top of your schach mat to provide some natural weight with things which are good for schach. And then if you want to put some additional ties with plastic or any type of different type of material, that would be 100% fine. Okay, so that's the first topic of supporting schach with things that are not kosher for schach themselves. Okay, second topic. What's the story with canvas sukkahs? Okay, so you hear different rumors. People say different things. Canvas sukkah is good, not good, not good. Okay, so this is based on a Gemara I believe you had yesterday, Chavdal Amud Beis. That the Gemara there talks about a mechitza, a wall, which I forget the exact words of the Gemara. It's not able to withstand a ruach mitzuya. Is not a mechitza, it's not a wall. Okay, so there's a fascinating disagreement between the Chazon Ish. So the Chazon Ish was died, I believe, in the late 1940s in Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Bnei Brak, and Reb Moshe Feinstein and others. The Chazon Ish understood, which would be a big leniency for us, that the only time it's a problem is if the wind would blow and destroy your wall, which would basically mean any of our sukkahs are 100% fine, because none of our sukkahs, with a normal wind that would blow, would completely collapse. There are others who understood that the Gemara means that if there's even some level of movement, I'm being vague on purpose because the exact amount is not so clear to me, but if there's a certain level of movement of the wall, would actually disqualify the wall from being a kosher wall for a sukkah. So theoretically, that could present a problem, that if a person has a material which easily blows in the wind, if it blows enough, it could actually not be a kosher wall for a sukkah. Okay, so I remember growing up, right, before they made these nice Sukkah Depot frames with a fitted fabric to the frame, so what did we used to do? We used to have the metal frame, and you would buy your own piece of tarp, and it was actually very loose. Right now the Sukkah Depot ones are very, very tight because it's made to size. Okay, so in theory, according to some opinions, that could be a problem. Now there's a very easy way to avoid this issue, which is why when you buy the Sukkah Depot sukkahs, it comes with loved scraps. Okay, so we learned in the Gemara there's something called loved, which means there's a halacha that says that if the gap is less than 3 tvachim, so if you look at your sheet, I gave a list of different measurements here. Okay, so one is the opinion of the Chazon Ish, and one is the opinion of Reb Chaim Noah. These are two different measurements given. So as you see, the Chazon Ish's numbers are consistently bigger, and Reb Chaim Noah's numbers are consistently smaller. Okay, so now what gets a little tricky, just you have to think it out, is that if we're going to be stringent for both, so we have to pay attention to what halacha we're trying to figure out to make sure we're fulfilling both opinions. So if I want to make sure I have less than 3 tvachim between my loved scraps, so that means we have to take the smaller number, which is the second column, Reb Chaim Noah, which means 3 tvachim is 9.39 inches, which means my gap between my loved scraps as I build my wall needs to be less than 9.39 inches in between each scrap. Now, what's the minimum size of a wall of a sukkah? 10 tvachim. Now, if we're going to be stringent for both opinions, I have to look at the Chazon Ish, which is a higher shiur, measurement of 10 tvachim. So that's 3 feet and 1.6 inches. So I'm going to use the smaller amount in between my strings so that I'm fulfilling even that opinion that there's not too big of a gap, but I'm going to make sure that I have a 10 tefach wall even according to the Chazon Ish, which is the bigger shiur. Okay, so just an easy practical way to do this is if you make strings 8 inches apart. So why am I saying 8 if it's 9.39 is okay? Because practically, go try it. It's not so easy to measure and get it exactly the right amount, right? They move around a little bit. It's just not so practical. So give a little bit of leeway. If a person does 8 inches and he goes all the way up till 40 inches, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, then you fulfilled both opinions. Right? And then technically, when you look at the wall of your sukkah, you could technically drop the canvas. Your walls are the strings, even though your sukkah is see-through. Your walls are the strings. You have 8 inches all the way up till 40 inches, which makes it a 10 tefach wall according to both opinions. That would be an easy way to solve this issue. So my father could be the witness that I make sure we tie down the strings. Now, technically, one could argue that since our canvas is so tight that it's really 100% fine. And there certainly are opinions that hold our canvas is 100% fine. So I myself would be comfortable going to somebody's house without the luggage straps and do it. If I'm building my own sukkah, so for the extra 5-10 minutes, it's certainly an easy, nice thing to do, to build the luggage straps in. The way a person does it is on 3 or 4 walls. Now 4 doesn't mean all the way around because then it's difficult to get in. 4 means 3.5 walls. So you build the luggage straps on 3.5 walls, you tie the strings, measure it out 8 inches. You can use that middle metal bar as one of your, that's normally the top one. So you do 8 inches till you're less than 8 inches to that metal bar, then you're 100% good to go. Okay, so that's just an easy way to avoid the whole conversation of the canvas sukkahs. If for some reason a person can't do it, if it's the new type of sukkah depots, I would be comfortable saying it's okay. If it's the old style, which really are much looser and flat much more, then I would look into that a little bit more before sukkahs. That's why you have a little bit of time. Okay, that's the second main issue. Now the third issue is there's a whole complicated discussion in halacha that there is different halacha Moshe Messinas, right? There was different traditions that we learned throughout the Gemara and Sukkah. Okay, so for example, lavud, which is something less than 3 tefachim, is considered closed. Dofen akuma, that if you have not kosher material, you can see it as a slanted wall. There's a whole complicated discussion which should be avoided, which is, can you use 2 of them together? Okay, so an easy way where a person would be trying to use 2 of them together is if his wall only goes up 10 tefachim, so then you're saying good asik, which means you're saying one halacha which says it goes up, and if your schach is not all the way touching your wall, so then you would be saying, let's see it as if it goes up, which is 1, and then lavud, which is see as it goes over. So easiest way to avoid that, just make sure your schach, if your wall doesn't hit the ceiling, just make sure your schach is on top of your wall so that you're only saying one halacha, which is see as if it goes up. Okay, another issue which could be very relevant nowadays is the following scenario. Okay, imagine this is the wall of my house. Okay, and this is my overhang. Okay? Now if this is my overhang and I build my sukkah underneath, right? This is my overhang, here's my gutter. Okay, I build my sukkah underneath. Now, if I need this to be one of the walls of my sukkah, which means I only have 3 walls, including this wall. Okay, so now we are presented with the following issue. That we learned that if there's a tree or something that's not good for schach on top of my schach, then it makes the schach under it not good. Okay, so you'll tell me, but we learned there's something called dofen akuma, that view this as a slanted wall. And if you view that as a slanted wall, I can consider this as part of my wall. Now the problem's like this. All the cases in the Gemara are talking about is where here's the wall, here's the not kosher schach, and then my schach attaches right here. Now most people, assuming your schach is not as high as the roof of your house, so your sukkah is down here. So now, can I use the wall of my house if my schach is down here? Okay, so it's not explicit anywhere, but I've talked to a couple of different people about this who held that you cannot do such a thing. Which means if you have 3 walls without this wall, you have 1, 2, 3, so you could space out for the next couple of minutes. Okay, but if you need this wall, so how are you going to make it that you can use this wall? So even if it's within 4 amas, because we learned how much not kosher schach will divide my sukkah, 4 tvachim. Right? By space, avir is 3 tvachim, not kosher schach is 4 tvachim. So if we look at our chart, that is, smaller amount would be 12.5 inches. Okay? So assuming your overhang is more than about a foot, which I believe normally the overhangs are more than a foot, probably closer to 2 feet. So then I have a problem, because here's my schach. I have anything under the overhang. You have to view it, even though it looks like a schach mat, you have to view it as metal. It's no good. So if I have more than a foot, 12.5 inches, that's going to make it that I have more than 12.5 inches of not kosher schach in the middle of my sukkah. Normally, the way you solve that issue is with dofen akuma, which is that you can see the roof as an extension of my wall, but the Gemara's cases is where my schach directly connects to my not kosher materials. In this case, where I'm building my sukkah under my roof, you can't say dofen akuma. So I'm stuck with this issue of not kosher schach in the sukkah. Okay, so what's the easiest way to avoid this? You make sure your schach touches your wall. If you make sure your schach touches your wall, so I don't have enough hands here, but what I'm doing is this, my left hand, is not kosher schach because it's under the roof, but my dofen akuma, my slanted wall, is up here through my left hand. Now I don't have to say my slanted wall's up here, because since my not kosher schach connects to my wall, so this, anything under my roof, is as if it's not kosher schach itself. So now I go up my wall through this hand, assuming it's less than 4 amos, which it's going to be. So now this is really the wall of my sukkah, and that takes me, that will allow me to use this as the third wall of my sukkah. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so that's could potentially be a big problem, but it's very easy to solve. So just make sure that that schach touches the wall. If you don't have enough schach, take a towel and tie it to your schach and tie it to your wall. It doesn't have to be kosher material. It just has to be material. Because if there's material connecting it, so then dofen akuma allows you to see that as my wall. But if it's disconnected, which it naturally normally will be, if it's like this, so then it could present an issue. Okay, the last issue which could come up, which is also very easy to solve, is when you decorate your sukkah. Okay, so as long as the decorations are within 4 tvachim. So again, if we look at our sheet, the smaller amount here would be, it needs to be basically within a foot. As long as your decorations are within a foot of the roof, you could cover it as much as you want, it's 100% fine. Now, the problem is the fancy decorations, right, come and these big, huge 4-foot things, and they hang down 3-4 feet. Okay, so this gets into a discussion, which is, does it need to all be within the foot of the roof, or does it just need to start within the foot of the roof? Okay, so again, if a person is designing his own sukkah, and before you go to the A to Z and pick out your decorations, I would say preferably buy the smaller decorations that start. If everything's already decorated, so then as long as it really starts within that foot of the roof, it would really be okay. Okay, so just to summarize, and if anybody has any questions, the 5 or so issues we talked about. One is, preferably a person should support his schach with something that is good for schach itself. Easiest way to do that, the bamboo, which goes across the metal frame, and then you put your schach mat on top. If he already built his sukkah in a way that there is metal or something else not good for schach supporting his schach, it's really 100% okay. You can make a bracha, it's good. If you want to tie down your schach with plastic ties to avoid the wind knocking it off in the middle of Yontif, that's okay, but make sure that your schach can last on the sukkah in normal weather with materials good for schach. Throw up a couple pieces of wood on top to give it some natural weight, and then if you want to do additional ties, that's okay. Canvas sukkahs, if it's the old style canvas, then I would understand it's getting into bigger issues, and the lovet straps would be more necessary to really make the wall. If it's the newer type of Sukkah depot straps, of Sukkah depot sukkahs, which are very, very tight, so I would say it's okay. If a person wants to go the extra mile, so to speak, and make the lovet straps, so the way we described is 8 inches till you hit 40 inches, which makes it that you have less than that 3 tefachim gap, and you get all the way up to a 10 tefach wall, so that can really be your wall itself. Good to avoid a double hilchasa. Okay, so the most common case that would be is if you're going to use something, your walls don't hit the roof, just make sure your schach is at least on top of that material that you have, so you're not saying one halacha go up and another one to go over. Issue number 4 is if you have an overhang which hangs over your sukkah and you need that wall, make sure your material touches that wall. If it touches that wall, as long as it's less than 4 amos, which is very big, then you're good to go. If it doesn't touch that wall and you need that wall, that could be a real serious issue that should be avoided. And the last is decorations. Preferably just make sure it's within a foot of the roof. and decorate as you wish. If it's beyond that, so then at least make sure it starts within the foot, and then if it continues, then it would be okay. Okay.
Decoration being a problem is like a cover? Is that what you're saying? It's like
So if it's within the foot, so then we don't see it as any type of divide. It's like bottle. In other words, we see it as nullified to the schach. If it's far enough, so then it makes it that you're really not sitting in the sukkah, you're sitting under the decorations. So that's the issue.
We talk about the canvas wall. Are we talking about any area of that wall? Are we talking about the whole wall is blowing out? Meaning if you have a flap on the bottom is blowing, up on top is blowing, but the body of the canvas is still...
Right, so maybe the biggest issue would be by the bottom, because we saw right in the Gemara that there's no halacha that the wall has to hit the roof, but there is a halacha that the wall has to touch the floor. So if you have your bottom 10 tefachim secured, then once you're above that, if your top is as loose as could be, that would technically be fine because you could cut it off and you'd be fine. But if the bottom, if you forgot to Velcro the bottom and that's flapping back and forth, that would be a real issue. Right. Okay, thank you everybody for coming.